In good weather or bad, we expect to travel where we want, when we want. But nature isn't always so accommodating. If she's in a fickle mood, she can surprise us with a sudden change in the weather. This invisible and mysterious force is the lifeblood of flight. It can also be the death of an aircraft. On January 13, 1982, Washington, D.C. had its worst snowstorm in decades. The nation's capital was shut down. Workers were sent home early. Washington National Airport was snowed in all morning, but reopened by mid-afternoon to the relief of thousands of travelers escaping to warmer climates. Passengers to Miami boarded Air Florida's Flight Palm 90, trusting their fate to a crew that investigators concluded had little experience in bad weather.
I remember before we finally got on the airplane that I looked out there and I didn't see any evidence that the pilots had done a ground check of the airplane, which I could tell because there was no footprints walking around the airplane in the snow, and it never, the snow still looked undisturbed. So that bothered me a little bit. I specifically remember thinking, I want to see somebody walk around that airplane before I got on it. I never did see anybody walk around the airplane. Those guys were sitting in their cockpit and talking about the weather in Florida, as I recall, when I got on the airplane. The captain announced, after we had tried a couple times to back out using the tractor, he announced that the tractor was incapable of pulling us out by itself, but I do recall that he used some reverse thrust to try to back us out. In the snow and ice, I thought that was pretty abnormal. And as it turned out, it was, because it had the effect of sucking up, the storm debris into the engines, and I think that I know now from reading the accident reports that was a contributing cause to what happened to us. I didn't think we'd actually get airborne, but I could feel us lift off the runway. The shaker was going, I could hear the dishes coming out of the galley all over everywhere, and I knew we were in deep shit. When we hit the bridge, it was kind of like being rear-ended on a freeway. And I said, Jesus, I survived that. And then I realized I was still heavily in motion, and the next thing I know, and we were tumbling, it seemed like. And then we hit something that seemed like 100 times harder than that first hit, which had to be hitting the river. And I blacked out, and as I was blacking out, I just figured that was it, so my last thought was, God help me.
Oh my God. Holy shit.
The plane had hit the 14th Street Bridge over the Potomac River, the main route into Washington from the suburbs of Virginia. Several cars were crushed by the plane's undercarriage.
The dark in that airplane, it was absolutely pitch black. I remember it settling onto the ground or onto the bottom of the river before I could get my legs free. And I remember swimming out over the top of the seats toward the back of the airplane. I knew I was out of the airplane when the light in the water turned from absolute black to sort of gray. And the contrast between having been in a nice hot airplane about 1 minute earlier, or maybe 5 minutes earlier, whatever it was, and where I suddenly found myself was just phenomenal. I mean, the airplane was gone. Everything was gone. Maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes went by, something like that. And a bunch of rescue vehicles showed up on the Virginia side of the river. And I remember saying something, hey, everything's cool. They're here, And must have been half a dozen vehicles or so pulled up and sat, parked right beside the river there, and everybody jumped up. And there were another 500 people standing out there looking at us, and they just kept standing there and looking at us with their lights going and their sirens going and all that. And eventually I realized they had no way to get to us. And there were 10,000 people probably standing up on that bridge, or it seemed like 10,000. And they were all looking at us, and the irony began to set in on me that, I'd survived an airplane crash and I was going to freeze to death.
I had just gotten there, and it was about 3 deep at the bar, and I'd ordered a drink, and I don't think I ever got it. And someone said there was something on television. They had a couple TVs in there that an airplane had crashed into the Potomac. And the first vision I had was a Cessna 172 or something like that had crashed in the Potomac. Didn't make much of it. And then there was a phone at the end of the bar, and there was a guy yelling. There were 4 lines lit up, and he was yelling for some people I knew. He was hollering across this crowd, and all the pagers started going off. And then we looked up, and we saw it, and someone got on the phone, and they said that a 737 had crashed in the Potomac. And so needless to say, we didn't have another drink.
75 people died aboard Air Florida's Palm 90 that day on the edge of Washington, less than a mile from the White House. Despite all the rescuers and all their technology, only 5 passengers could be saved from the freezing river. Flight attendant Kelly Duncan, Joe Stiley's secretary, Nikki Felch, she would be rescued later by a National Park Service helicopter. Joe Stiley and Priscilla Tirado, whose husband and infant child never made it out of the plane. Priscilla Tirado was temporarily blinded by jet fuel spilled in the river. Numbed by the cold, she started to go under. A passerby, Lenny Skuknik, had seen enough. He saved her life.
Yeah. Everybody get behind the spot. Get behind the fire truck, all right? Let's get across there. Run across the bridge on the opposite side.
Investigators with the National Transportation Safety Board began sifting through the wreckage, but what they retrieved only deepened the mystery. They found no signs at all of mechanical trouble. So why had the plane plunged into the river? True, the weather was bad, but other aircraft had made it through the snowstorm. Why not Palm 90? Then they found the black box, the cockpit voice recorder. The last seconds of this 30-minute audio tape preserved the desperation of the pilots as they realized they weren't going to make it. Mike McDermott is an independent air accident investigator and a specialist in CVRs, cockpit voice recordings.
The CVR indicates the general attitude of the crew as being one of disguised concern. There's a lot of joking around, you hear a lot of laughing, but the joking seems to be as a way of coping with the difficulty of the situation. Their nervousness in flying in snow may be due to their lack of experience. There are instances where they indicate the fact that the de-icing doesn't quite help them.
This is the Lewis battle here on trying to de-ice these things. They give you a false feeling of security, that's all it is. That's tight,
They also indicate, and when they're going through their checklist and they're planning for the actual takeoff, they're talking about what they will do, how they will take off. They will apply power. They'll let the nose wheel come off the ground, fly to 500 feet, reduce the power. And their last comment is to reduce it to a certain level depending on their level of comfort, or as they say, how scared we are.
I'll put it back about 1.55, about 1.6. Still how scared we are.
So I think they were very nervous about the situation. They knew that they were heavy. They had a lot of passengers and a lot of weight on board, and the snow only added to their weight, and that caused them some concern.
By analyzing the engine noise on the tape, investigators discovered that the pilot never applied full power, even when the plane was about to drop out of the sky. They concluded, unbelievable as it seemed, that when the crew was running through the pre-flight checklist, they failed to turn on the anti-icing equipment.
And that became a very, very controversial issue when we listened to the cockpit voice recorder, and they went through the checklist and they said engine anti-ice, and they said off, but nobody wanted to believe that they said off. Why would they say off? And there was so much disagreement later on as the investigation progressed that the tape was again reviewed, I think, by the FBI lab and voice analysis, and some people just said, no, it can't be off, it's got to be on.
Did the co-pilot say on or off? Was the anti-icing equipment on or not? Sophisticated sound equipment can clear up the mystery. From the audio tape, McDermott extracts the co-pilot's response to another item on the pre-flight checklist when he says on. Alongside it, he places the suspect word, which he calls onf.
And after you've listened to this for hours, literally hours on end, I think it becomes very apparent that the second word is actually off.
The investigators' report concluded the word was off. Despite the freezing cold, the crew apparently forgot to switch on the plane's anti-icing equipment. An incredible blunder. Worse, when the captain used reverse thrust to back the plane out of the gate, he choked the engines with ice and snow. The probes that indicate engine power froze up, giving false readings to the crew. They believed they were taking off at full power.
The co-pilot apparently understood what was happening, and he desperately tried to tell the captain until the very last minute that it doesn't look right, and the captain simply didn't respond to it.
Now you hear that whine, that's the application of power. You hear them talking about their engine instruments, say this is cold, this is real cold. It doesn't seem right. No, that's not right. It's the same guy. Says, no, I don't think that's right. He's really concerned about this and is not performing right. He sort of resigns himself to it and says, yeah, well, maybe it is. Okay, at this point, they've lifted the nose off the ground and they're flying. You hear the stick shaker, the da-da-da-da-da-da sound, indicating that they're not flying fast enough. They're about to stall the wing of the aircraft. And the pilot is saying, forward, forward, we only need 500 feet. And that was the sound of the impact.
The Air Florida investigation was a milestone in the use of cockpit voice recordings to solve an accident. It also reinforced a message as old as flight itself.
I frankly don't know how much more you can tell people that you have to have a clean airplane. You can't have ice on it. I know the operations are complex, traffic situations, airport traffic, clearances, weather conditions that delay airplanes. I mean, those are all facts of life. These things happen. But at the bottom line is, when you got ice on the airplane, you're probably going to die.
That lesson would be brought home again, tragically, 12 years later. The NTSB's most controversial case in years is in the hands of its most flamboyant investigator. Greg Feith joined the NTSB straight from school for a short stint. 16 years later, he's still there.
I am a professional tin kicker. I go out there hunting down the clues, and the only way to do that is to roll the wreckage over, rummage through the wreckage to see what it's going to tell us. Well, I think that's just been a perfect way to describe the people that do this work. Airplanes are made of aluminum, and we're out there kicking it. When I go out to an accident site, and all I have is 10 acres of bits and pieces of airplane, my challenge is to go out there and try and put all those pieces back together again and figure out what actually happened to bring me to this place. I mean, I like going out and using my mind to put the puzzle back together again. That's the challenge for me. I got the greatest job in the world. As bad as it is, I have the greatest job in the world.
With more planes and more accidents, the United States is regarded as the world leader in air crash investigation. Greg Feith is a member of the NTSB's Elite Go team, on duty 24 hours a day to fly straight to the scene of a major accident.
Arriving at an accident site is probably the most traumatic thing anybody could ever experience. I've conditioned myself over 16 years of doing this business, but it still bothers me when I get there, only because you have a sense of an adrenaline rush. You get there, you're pumped, you're ready to go to work, but you have to step back for a moment because you're looking at death and destruction in just magnitudes that are sometimes incomprehensible. It's one of those things where once you've smelled an accident site, you never forget it. Accident sites have a distinct smell. You could put me in the woods, turn me around in circles, and if I'm downwind, I can smell my way to an accident site. It's just, there's just a distinct sense with airplane accidents. And once you've got that in your head, you never forget it. And while I wish I could forget it, I can't. And so getting out there, you take a step back, you adjust yourself to what you're about to do, and then you go forward and do it. Some of us handle it better than others. I work with people from varying backgrounds that when they get to an accident site, they can't handle it because they can't comprehend what they're seeing out there. The death, the destruction. When you look out the window of a terminal at the airport and you see a big, beautiful 747, weighs 800,000 pounds and can carry 500 people, and then you get out to an accident site and the biggest part of that airplane left is a rudder or maybe an engine, and the loss of life that's involved, it's like looking up at night, looking at the stars and wondering where it all ends. It's very hard to comprehend it sometimes.
For 2 years, Feith has been investigating a crash involving the ATR. It's a turboprop, a propeller-driven aircraft ideal for commuter flights. Built by the French firm Aerospatiale, the ATR is widely popular. 468 of them fly around the world. But Greg Feith thinks a cloud hangs over the aircraft. On October 31st, 1994, American Eagle Flight 4184 took off from Indianapolis with 64 passengers and a crew of 4. Before arrival in Chicago, the plane was put in a holding pattern. Half an hour later, the ATR suddenly nosedived into a field outside Roselawn, Indiana, killing everyone on board.
When we got out there, it was total catastrophic destruction of the airplane. There was really nothing left. There were markers, and as you looked over the field, it was a 20-acre field. All you could see was stakes that indicated people or what was the remains of people and airplane parts. And the magnitude, to see that, I was standing out there thinking, I don't have much of an airplane to look at. I don't have much of anything to look at. We knew that the weather was involved. We knew that it had been windy. We knew that it was raining. We had people at the scene that were giving us that information. We also found out that there were icing conditions in the area.
Ice is a particular problem for turboprops. Normal jets fly at high altitudes, above the ice, and have heated wings. But the ATR flies low, right in the icing zone. It doesn't have enough engine heat to warm the wings, so it uses boots, pneumatic leading edges on the wings that can be inflated to break off the ice. The aircraft that crashed at Roselawn had been circling for half an hour in freezing conditions.
The crew, basically, they understood that they were in icing conditions because they could see it. They had activated all the ice protection systems on the airplane. And so when they looked out the window and they saw that the system was handling the ice, they didn't perceive it as a threat. And it was during the course of flying in this holding pattern on the last circuit, they had the autopilot on. The airplane was basically flying on automation. The captain had just returned from the back of the airplane where he'd used the restroom and got back into his seat, and the airplane rolled uncommandedly to the right. The autopilot kicked off and the airplane rolled substantially to the right, first being corrected by the first officer who was able to regain control of the airplane momentarily, and then a secondary roll. And then the airplane went into a severe nose-down pitch attitude from which the flight crew was unable to recover. And the airplane then eventually struck the ground at about 475 knots, or about 500 miles an hour.
The NTSB concluded that the ailerons, the little flaps behind the wings that let a plane bank and turn, flipped over all by themselves and put the plane into a nosedive. But why? Greg Feith discovered that the ATR had been flying in freezing rain.
You have a raindrop. It's called a supercooled drizzle droplet or a supercooled rain droplet, and it varies in size from maybe 40 microns up to 2,000 microns. Now, people don't understand what that all means. 40 microns is about the size of the tip of a lead pencil. That's how small it can be. Whereas a 2,000 micron drop is the size of a large raindrop that when it hits the ground, it splats and it turns into about a silver dollar size. Given that fact, these are very, very cold droplets. So they start as an ice crystal or a snowflake. They may fall in this cold band of air, then warm up and turn into liquid state again, but never refreeze. So you have a drop that is well below freezing, but is still liquid form. Now the airplane flies through the cloud. This raindrop strikes that airplane. Now, depending on the size of the drop, it may instantaneously freeze, or it may be a sufficient size where it'll actually start to run a little bit. It'll trail back until it loses all of its energy and its heat, and it'll freeze.
Could this phenomenon have something to do with the accident? To find out, the NTSB carried out an unprecedented test. They deliberately flew an ATR into harm's way. A plane in front directed a yellow spray of freezing raindrops back onto the ATR's wings. A chase plane recorded what happened.
What those icing tests showed us was that this airplane was susceptible to a phenomenon of an ice ridge that built up behind that protected surface, or that boot along the leading edge. This ridge of ice that was developed during the icing tanker test that we have photographs of, we could see exactly where it built up. It disrupted the airflow so much that it caused the aileron to move all by itself. And if the pilots weren't anticipating it, they didn't expect it, they didn't have their hands on the control yoke, this aileron would then move, causing the airplane to react. And with Roselawn, it happened so quickly. You had a 14-degree movement of the ailerons in a quarter of a second. That's a blink of an eye. Boom. And that airplane rolled 77 degrees.
Greg Feith's findings were officially adopted by the NTSB, despite vigorous protests from the French. They issued their own report on the accident, blaming the pilots, not the plane. But to keep flying in America, Aerospatiale redesigned the ATR's wings. Snow, sleet, ice, all send a chill down a pilot's spine. But even cloudless skies can hide a dark lining, as passengers discovered on a beautiful, deadly day in Texas. Many crashes once blamed on pilots are now thought to have been caused by turbulence. Only in the 1970s, after a series of appalling accidents, was the most lethal turbulence recognized and given a name: wind shear. Its most deadly form is called a microburst. A microburst is like a high-pressure air hose pointed at the ground. As the air hits the earth, it bounces upward and outward in every direction. Out of nowhere, the full horrors of a microburst were visited upon Dallas-Fort Worth, the second biggest airport in the world.
August the 2nd, 1985 was a day I'll never forget. It was your typical Texas day. Beautiful weather. You couldn't have asked for a more perfect day. And when we finished cleaning the trucks for that day and put them up in the stalls for the next emergency call, we're preparing our evening meal, and it's just before 6 o'clock. There's a weather warning comes on. The weatherman says we've got a severe weather cell at the north end of DFW Airport. And we're all looking at each other, knowing what we just came out of, how beautiful it was, and we're saying, this guy's got to be crazy.
For the next 30 minutes, Delta Flight 191 would endure the full fury of Mother Nature.
Boy, this is a very strong rain shower. Boy, you can see the thunderstorm over there on the horizon, but I think everything is fine. A little bouncy today, but no problem. Oh, yes. Everything looks fine. Checklist is complete, and we have been cleared to land.
Charlie Phipps, a Delta Airlines training captain, retraces Flight 191's ill-fated path. Using data from the flight recorder, his simulator is programmed with exactly the same weather Flight 191 encountered that day.
A little bit more turbulence than I expected. Glide slope, we're coming up on the glide slope again. Everything is fine. Seems like we're losing some air speed. The tailwind, yes, we got a tailwind now, a strong tailwind. Oh, yes.
Before we ran into the storm, you could hear everybody on the plane laughing and cutting up and, just idle chatter. But as we got into the storm more and more, the plane got quieter and quieter. And finally, there was, you could hear a pin drop in the plane.
Wow, look at the tailwind. We've got a heck of a tailwind here. Oh, my God. Come on, airplane. Come on. Come on, fly, baby. Come on, baby. You can make it. Come on. Come on.
Wind shear.
Come on, baby.
Glide slope.
Come on.
Spin 'em up.
Come on. Oh.
50, 40.
Its engines screaming at full power, the plane touched down in a field, careened across a freeway, snapping off lampposts, and bounced down on a car, killing its occupant. Then it entered the airfield at full speed, heading not for the runway, but for 2 4-million-gallon water tanks.
The ride really got rougher. And when we hit the first water tower, nobody knew what we hit. And it was only a few seconds after that, tenths of seconds, we hit the second water tower. And that's when all the debris and the fire came back up the left side of the plane. And that's when I ducked my head. And you really didn't know what to do. I just knew I didn't want to die. I don't know how long I sat in my chair after the plane finally came to a rest and everything, but I noticed there was only 2 people left in the plane, maybe 3, besides myself. And the plane didn't have no middle section. All the middle seats were gone. And about that time, you could hear the sirens going off. The first aid was coming to us.
The rain was so hard that I couldn't see past my windshield. The rain and the wind was holding the windshield wipers back. They wouldn't even wipe the windshield. I tried to roll the window down to see. It was like somebody standing outside with a bucket of water hitting me in the face with it. It was that bad. As I approached the crash scene then and actually got to the tanks, I was not ready for what I saw. Through all my years of training, firefighters training, I really expected to see an aircraft sitting there on the ground, but there was no aircraft. It was just pieces of an aircraft. We had 4 million gallons of water pouring out of those tanks, and when I got out of the vehicle, the water was actually almost to my chin. It was that deep, and I could see the debris from this aircraft, looming out of the water, and fire and smoke and fuel burning on the water, and I could actually see bodies burning, and it was just a tremendous sight. Things happen in your life that, any other time I would have never in my life been able to remember August the 2nd, 1985. But this was such a tremendous thing that happened in my life and the life of all our other firemen that we'll never forget that day.
The NTSB completed its report on the Dallas crash, but for once it failed to agree with its own investigator. Rudy Kapustin retired before the investigation was complete, and his report was finished by others. To this day, he disagrees with its findings, that the crew were mainly to blame.
The crew, I think, when you try to evaluate did the crew do the right thing and do the wrong thing, well, in retrospect, obviously they did the wrong thing, because they crashed. Can't say they did the right thing, but did they act prudently based on what they knew and continuing the approach based on what they knew at the time? I would say yes.
Lightning coming out of that one. What? Lightning coming out of that one.
The members of the board criticized the pilots for flying through a thunderstorm and trying to land in it. On this computerized animation, reconstructed from the plane's own flight recorders, the black column the plane is heading for is the microburst. But the pilots had been told it was just a rainstorm and that other planes were landing safely.
But there's always a reluctance, particularly if someone landed just in front of you. Everybody would say, American or TWA just landed, how come you couldn't land? The passengers will do that. They don't like to be late.
The consequences of that reluctance can be heard on the plane's cockpit voice recording.
Now, the air traffic centers, air route traffic control centers, have meteorologists ever since, or because of some weather-involved accident some years ago, had meteorologists assigned. Well, I think the one at DFW Center, he wasn't there. The backup weather facility wasn't functioning. Another one that was a backup facility for that. So in reality, real-time weather was never disseminated to that flight crew. And I was gone from the board when the report was adopted, and I had serious disagreements with the report because air traffic was just pretty much left out of the cause, and that I don't think was a fair assessment of what caused that particular accident. They pretty much left it all with the crew, based on the fact that one of the crew members said, "Yeah, there's lightning in it." They knew there was weather up there. And they said, yeah, there was lightning in it. Well, you don't know where that lightning was in relation, to their position.
137 people died at Dallas. Since then, the federal government has ordered wind shear radar installed at all major airports. And NASA has developed a device that can be fitted on a plane to give 45 seconds advance warning of wind shear, enough to allow the plane to get out of trouble. So far, only one airline, Continental, has installed it. But what no one can guard against is a bizarre and unpredictable ill wind that blows no good at all.
We have an airplane crash over here, I guess around Whitefield Park or
Air crash detectives are rarely stumped for a solution. Even the most tangled heap of wreckage usually gives up an answer. But recently, the NTSB has declared itself mystified by two serious accidents. Both happened to the same type of plane, and in an eerily similar way.
What kind is it, Mrs. Smith?
I don't know.
The first occurred in 1991 in Colorado Springs, in the foothills of the Rockies. It was witnessed by a teenager with a video camera.
Okay, they're telling us to move the area. Because, sir.
They don't want anything touched.
What kind of plane is it, do you know?
Small private plane.
Private jet or something.
Small private plane?
But this was no small private plane. It was a Boeing 737, the most popular passenger aircraft in the world. Of the 25 passengers aboard, not a trace remained.
I don't think that there's any survivors in there.
But Colorado Springs, the airplane had crashed into a hole, virtually nose first. We had a flight data recorder with 5 parameters that didn't give us a lot of information. Cockpit voice recorder, which was audible but of not very good quality. We knew that the weather in the area at the time was very windy. We do know that it was bad. In fact, I heard sometime into the investigation that we had gotten a call from a citizen who had a group of homing pigeons that I guess they turn them loose for some kind of a competition, or to fly from one place to the other. And on that day, near the time of the accident, this gentleman had turned his homing pigeons loose, and they had been thrown to the ground.
One thread ran through all the eyewitness accounts. A mysterious wind, powerful enough to blow cars around in a junkyard and knock buildings over in the night. Several people spoke of seeing a huge rotor, a sort of horizontal tornado, rolling off the Rockies. The NTSB was unconvinced. Rotors exist, but none has ever been recorded that can knock over a Boeing 737.
It's very frustrating personally. I was the chief of the investigation division. The investigators in charge worked for me. That's our job, find the cause. Put a team out there and find the cause and write the report and write the recommendations. And it's a sense of failure that we couldn't do it. I know that my colleagues shared that, and I know the board shared it. We had to, in a public meeting, come in and present the evidence after 19 months and say we didn't have the cause.
And then it happened again. In September 1994, 3 years after Colorado Springs, USAir Flight 427 into Pittsburgh crashed in almost identical circumstances. 132 people died. At the NTSB, alarm bells began to ring.
Since Colorado Springs, which is not a solved accident in terms of a definitive cause, since that time, we have been taking a look at 737s everywhere in the world that crash. Every time a 737 has an event, we've been monitoring it quite closely. So when you initially come up to something like Pittsburgh, it makes you wonder whether it's another Colorado-type Springs event. Maybe we'll find here the clue that solves Colorado Springs. Maybe not. Going to the accident scene itself, how surreal and quiet it was. It had just rained. It was very early in the morning, about 7:30, and we actually got to the accident site. The wreckage was still smoldering, so you're walking through probably the most incredible devastation I've seen in fragmentation at an accident site.
You can see it's not very far from the tail section.
Bodies up there.
Yeah, the first on scene was very unreal. just taking a look around and then trying to find out where the various pieces of the airplane were, because we initially walked up the scene, you couldn't see anything recognizable as an airplane.
I may be wrong on that. This is a pressure switch of some sort. Yeah, pressure switch.
It's a one of the leading edge sled actuators. Rich, we got a sled actuator here.
Okay, that's a Kruger flap actuator.
Be careful, Jesus.
Should have come from the other side.
See a couple guys here.
You don't think somebody's trying to get out?
Very early in the investigation, it was clear looking at the flight data recorder that 427 had encountered the wake vortices of another aircraft at the time the upset started. In looking at the radar tapes, we were able to fit that a 727 had passed through just about the same airspace, but 300 feet higher at the time of the upset, and it was about 70 seconds ahead. This brought up the theory of what could the wake vortices from a 727 have caused on a 737.
Could the ghost of a passing aircraft be as dangerous as the aircraft itself? Turbulent airstreams coming from a plane's wingtips are called wake vortices. Could they be lethal?
We took an FAA 727, put vortex generators on its wings. USAir provided a 737 that we instrumented with all the parameters we'd like to have for rudder pedal position, this and that, and went out and flew about 120 different wake vortex encounters at different distances to see how severe a wake vortex could be. We collected a tremendous amount of data. Some of it's quite fascinating. But one thing it did show is that the wake vortice would not cause the same yaw motion that we need to cause the upset. It's clear that the event starts at the same time as the wake vortex is encountered, but we are fairly convinced that the vortex itself did not cause the loss of control of the aircraft.
A second crash with no obvious solution, unprecedented in the history of the NTSB. In both cases, the planes were on approach to an airport, turning onto the glide path, when they suddenly rolled over and dove into the ground. In both cases, the planes hit turbulence, strong winds at Colorado Springs, the wake of a passing aircraft at Pittsburgh. But in neither case was the turbulence strong enough to tip the plane over. To the investigators, it looked like the rudder was suddenly pulled hard over, something a pilot would be unlikely to do. Could the rudder have moved on its own?
One thing that we have learned from Pittsburgh is that the best match as to the cause of the accident is the deflection of the rudder. What may have caused the rudder to deflect remains the question in this investigation.
The USAir 737 was carefully reconstructed in a hangar. For 2 years, exhaustive tests were carried out on the rudder. Investigators looked for a microscopic particle that could cause it to jam suddenly. Until they find it, a question hangs over the world's most popular plane. Could it happen all over again?
There's a question in the public's mind about the safety of the 737. I receive calls and letters every now and then from somebody who has to fly on the 737 and ask me what they think of the airplane. The 737, there's over 64 million flight hours. There's something like 26,000 aircraft flying about. They're encountering different conditions all over the world every day. I'm told that a 737 takes off every 3 minutes somewhere in the world. Therefore, what we're looking for is not just unusual, it verges on being bizarre. We're looking for an event that has happened extremely rarely in the life of the aircraft. An event where the crew could not control the airplane, an event that they were unprepared for. Something that happened that is just beyond normal operation. Therefore, we're looking for this bizarre little element that can only happen once every, billion hours or something like that, a flight time, and it makes it more difficult. We're down looking at infinitesimal particles and what they may be doing. It makes it a very difficult and also in-depth investigation.
Do you have a hunch?
I have a hunch, but I'll keep that to myself.
Aircraft can't tame the power of the wind any more than ships can control the tides. Scientists still know little about the violent movements of the atmosphere, what causes storms to grow or die. No aircraft can resist the worst Mother Nature can throw at it. In fact, she is largely to blame for 1/3 of all disasters in the air. Behind the clouds of tragedy, there is a silver lining. We hold a few more clues about how to detect trouble in the wind and how to avoid it.
Back in the 50s and 60s, jet planes were rushed into service before safety issues were resolved. Things have gotten better since then, but how much? TLC investigates as we continue with Survival in the Sky next.